Rain hammered against the glass wall of the lobby as Maya stood there clutching her worn leather folder with one hand and holding her son's tiny fingers with the other. The boy's shoes squeaked on the marble floor, leaving faint little prints behind him. She tried to hush him, whispering, "Ethan, baby, stay close, okay?" He nodded, eyes wide, clutching a small red toy car like it was his shield. This was her last interview of the month, the last chance before rent was due, and the world had already given her too many maybes. She'd spent the morning sending apology emails for being late. 2 buses had broken down, and then the babysitter canceled at the last second. She didn't have a choice but to bring Ethan along. When she finally reached the receptionist's desk, the woman in a tight blazer frowned immediately. "Ma'am, this is a corporate interview, not a daycare." "I understand," Maya said quickly. There was no one else to watch him. He'll sit quietly, I promise." The receptionist's lips pressed thin. The hiring manager doesn't allow distractions. Maya's chest sank. "Please, I've been waiting weeks for this opportunity. Just let me explain." A voice cut through from the glass doors behind her. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned. A man walked in, tall and calm, his suit dark and rain-damp, his presence cutting through the room like quiet thunder. The receptionist straightened immediately. "Mr. Reed, sir, this applicant brought a child to the interview. I was just asking her to reschedule." The man, Noah Reed, looked at Maya, then at Ethan, who half hid behind his mother's leg but peeked out curiously. Noah's gaze softened. "And did she say why?" "She said she had no one else to watch him." The receptionist replied stiffly. He nodded once. "That seems like a good reason." The receptionist blinked. "Sir, it's against protocol. We can't have. Protocols can wait," he said simply, his tone gentle but final. "Let them both in." Maya stared at him, stunned. "You don't have to," he interrupted with a small smile. "I want to." Then he turned to Ethan and crouched slightly, so he was eye level with the boy. "You like cars?" Ethan nodded shyly, clutching his toy tighter. "Then you can tell me later which one's faster, all right?" Ethan gave a small grin, and for the first time all day, Maya's shoulders eased. Inside the conference room, she expected judgment, awkwardness, or condescension. Instead, Noah sat across from her, coat draped over the chair, sleeves rolled up. He didn't act like a CEO. He acted like a person. "Tell me about yourself, Maya," he said. Her voice trembled at first. "I'm a graphic designer. I've been freelancing since my husband passed. Most of my clients are small businesses, cafes, local startups, but I've wanted to grow. I just haven't had the stability." He nodded, listening carefully. "And what made you apply here?" She hesitated. "Because this company doesn't just sell products, it creates stories. I want to design things people remember. I want Ethan to see that his mom didn't stop trying." Noah's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, a mix of admiration and quiet pain. "That's a strong reason." Ethan, sitting beside her with a coloring book she'd packed, lifted his head suddenly. "Are you the boss?" Noah smiled faintly. "Something like that." "Then can you hire my mom?" Maya's face went red. "Ethan." But Noah only laughed, a sound that melted the room's stiffness. "She seems to have a good recommendation." The interview continued, filled with genuine conversation instead of rehearsed questions. She spoke with honesty, her passion slowly drowning out her nerves. When it ended, she stood and gathered her things quickly, trying to manage her dignity. "Thank you for giving me a chance," she said quietly. "I know this wasn't professional." Noah rose too. "You were professional. You just came with a reminder of why you're working this hard. That's not a flaw." She looked up, surprised by his kindness. "Most people don't see it that way." "I'm not most people," he said softly. As she turned to leave, Ethan waved his red car. "Bye, Mr. Boss." Noah smiled. "Bye, partner." When the elevator doors closed, Maya finally let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It wasn't just relief. It was hope, small and glowing, like the first sunrise after too many storms. That evening, while she was cooking noodles in her tiny kitchen, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it until she saw the message. "Hi, Maya. This is Noah Reed. Don't worry about protocols. Welcome to the team." Her hands shook, and tears blurred her eyes before she could even smile. She looked at Ethan, who was drawing spaceships on the wall with crayons, and whispered, "You got me the job, baby." He grinned, holding up his red car. "We did it. We did it." But somewhere downtown, Noah Reed stared out of his glass office window, phone still in his hand. A photo lay on his desk, an old one. A younger version of him standing beside a woman holding a baby with the same curious eyes as Ethan. His jaw tightened as he whispered to himself, "Looks like fate finally caught up." The night air over the city was heavy with rain again, streaking across the tall glass windows of Reed Industries as Noah stood in his office long after everyone else had gone home. The photo on his desk never moved, but his eyes stayed fixed on it, tracing the face of the woman beside his younger self. The resemblance between the boy in her arms and Ethan had been haunting him all afternoon. He hadn't planned on hiring Maya out of emotion. He wasn't that kind of man, but the second he saw her, something inside him stirred that logic couldn't explain. He turned the photo face down and whispered to no one, "You can't be her." The next morning, Maya walked into the building with Ethan's lunchbox in her purse and her heart pounding. She'd hardly slept, still half in disbelief that she'd actually been hired. She wore the same shoes she'd worn to the interview, scuffed at the edges but polished as best she could, and stepped into the bright, open workspace that smelled of coffee and new ambition. A woman in glasses greeted her with a smile. "You must be Maya. I'm Helen, Mr. Reed's assistant. Welcome aboard." "Thank you," Maya said, trying to keep her voice steady. Helen handed her a badge. "Mr. Reed asked to see you first thing. Straight to the top floor." Maya's stomach flipped. The top floor. CEOs didn't usually call new hires personally, but then again, nothing about this job was usual. When the elevator doors opened, Noah was already waiting by the window, coffee in hand. He turned when he heard her footsteps and smiled in that calm, careful way of his. "Morning, Maya." Settling in. "I haven't even started yet," she said nervously. He chuckled softly. "Then we'll start together." He motioned for her to sit across from him. "I wanted to talk about your role before the team overwhelms you." She nodded, opening her folder, ready to take notes. But then he surprised her again. "Before that, I wanted to apologize." She blinked. "Apologize? For what?" "For what that receptionist said yesterday. You shouldn't have had to explain why your son was with you. I grew up watching my mother juggle 3 jobs alone, so I understand a little of what it takes." Her throat tightened. "You were raised by a single mom?" He nodded. "She taught me that strength doesn't always wear a suit." The words hit her deeper than she expected. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. She smiled faintly. "Thank you. I don't hear that often." He looked down at his coffee for a moment, then back up at her. "Ethan, he's a good kid. Reminds me of someone I used to know." Something in his tone made her heart skip. "Someone important?" He hesitated. "Very." Before she could ask more, Helen knocked gently and entered. "Mr. Reed, the board meeting in 15. He nodded, then turned back to Maya. "Your desk is being set up downstairs near the design team. I'll introduce you to your manager this afternoon." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you again, Mr. Reed, for all of this." "Noah," he said quietly. "Call me Noah." She smiled, a little flustered. "All right, Noah." When she left, he watched her reflection disappear in the glass. His fingers reached for the photo again, the one of the woman holding a baby, his sister, Lily, who died in a car accident 6 years ago. She'd left behind an infant the family never found. The authorities had said the baby vanished during the chaos, adopted unofficially by someone who'd changed cities. But now, seeing Ethan's face, the puzzle pieces refused to stay separate. At lunch, the office buzzed with quiet curiosity. Word had spread quickly about the new designer who'd brought her kid to the interview, and somehow walked out with the job. Some admired her. Others whispered. But Maya didn't care. She was too focused on proving herself. She designed with instinct, moving between sketches and screens as if she'd been there for years. When Noah stopped by her desk that afternoon, the room fell silent. He looked over her shoulder, studying her work. "That's beautiful," he said softly. "It's just a draft," she replied, cheeks warming. "Then your drafts are better than most people's finished work." Their eyes met for a beat too long before someone coughed behind them, breaking the moment. That evening, as the office emptied, Noah called Helen back into his office. "I need a favor," he said quietly. "Find everything you can about Maya Carter, public records, birth certificates, anything. And check the adoption archives from 6 years ago." Helen frowned. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head slowly. "Just a feeling I can't ignore." The next day started bright and ordinary. Maya dropped Ethan at school, promised him spaghetti for dinner, and rode the subway with her sketchpad balanced on her knees. But when she arrived at work, security was unusually tense, and people were whispering in corners. She found Helen near the elevator. Is something going on? Helen hesitated, eyes darting toward Noah's office. You should probably go talk to him. Maya's pulse quickened. She walked in to find Noah standing behind his desk, the photo now lying face up beside two open folders. He looked up when she entered, his eyes unreadable. Maya, he said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Her voice came out cautious. Okay. Your son, Ethan, do you know anything about his biological family? Her breath caught. His father died before he was born. Why are you asking? Noah turned the photo toward her. The woman in it had Maya's same eyes. Because I think your husband wasn't the only one keeping secrets. She stared at the picture, confusion flooding her face, then looked up at him, her voice trembling. What are you saying? He stepped closer, his expression caught between hope and fear. I think Ethan might be my nephew. Maya froze where she stood, her breath catching somewhere between disbelief and panic. You're what? She whispered. My nephew. Noah said quietly, his tone steady but eyes uncertain. I'm not saying it as a guess, Maya. I've been looking for him for 6 years. She shook her head, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. That doesn't make sense. I've raised Ethan since the day he was born. He's mine. I adopted him legally. I know you did, Noah replied softly. That's how I found the record. Her pulse quickened. You looked into my life? He didn't flinch. I had to. I wasn't trying to invade your privacy. I just needed to know the truth. She turned away, trying to steady herself. You don't get to decide what truth looks like in my home. Ethan is my son. Whatever story you think you've uncovered, it doesn't change that. Noah came around the desk slowly, his voice low. Maya, please. Let me explain before you walk out. Her hand hovered near the doorknob, torn between anger and confusion. Then explain. He took a deep breath. 6 years ago, my sister Lily and her husband died in a car accident on the way to their anniversary dinner. There was a fire, and only one person survived long enough to tell us. A paramedic said a baby had been rescued before the explosion, handed off to a woman at the scene who vanished before the authorities could take her statement. They searched hospitals, adoption agencies, everything. There were no leads. The baby was gone. Maya's throat tightened as the room tilted around her. I was in that fire, she said faintly. Noah's head snapped up. What? She nodded slowly, her mind reeling. I was volunteering for the shelter near the highway that night. There was smoke everywhere. I remember pulling a car seat from the wreck. The baby wasn't hurt, just crying. The paramedics were shouting, people were panicking, and someone pushed me out of the way with the car seat in my arms. When I looked back, the flames were already too high. I waited for someone to come claim him, but no one did. I took him to the nearest hospital. Tears filled Noah's eyes before she even finished. You took him. Her voice broke. He was just a baby, and no one came for him. I kept checking the hospital records for weeks. The system said he was unclaimed. I couldn't just leave him in foster care, so I went through the process. It took a year to finalize, but he became mine. He is mine. Noah stepped closer, his expression torn between gratitude and heartbreak. You saved him. You saved my sister's son. Maya's knees weakened, and she gripped the back of a chair for balance. The silence stretched, heavy and raw, broken only by the distant hum of the city outside. When she finally spoke again, her voice was trembling. Why are you telling me this now? What do you want from us? Noah shook his head quickly. Not what you think. I don't want to take him from you. I could never do that. But Maya, he's the only family I have left. She closed her eyes, her heart aching. And he's the only family I've ever had. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt fragile, like a single word could shatter it. Then Noah whispered, maybe he doesn't have to choose between us. Maya's eyes opened, tears blurring the edges of his face. What do you mean? He smiled sadly. You've given him love. I can give him a future. Maybe for once, the world doesn't have to take something away to give something back. Her voice wavered. You really think it's that simple? No, he admitted. But I think it's worth trying. She sank into the chair, covering her face with both hands as tears spilled freely. I don't even know how to tell him something like this. You don't have to yet, Noah said softly. Not until you're ready. When she finally looked up, his eyes were gentler than before, his tone quiet but sure. I'm not here to replace you, Maya. I'm here to thank you. for raising him, for keeping him safe when the rest of us couldn't. Her voice cracked. You're really his uncle? He nodded. Every time I look at him, I see Lily's eyes. I didn't want to believe it at first, but now I can't unsee it. The room fell silent again until Noah spoke once more. Can I meet him properly? As family. Maya hesitated, searching his face for any sign of deceit. She saw none, only a kind of quiet pain that matched her own. Finally, she nodded. He gets out of school at 3. Noah smiled, relief flooding his features. Then I'll be there. When she left his office, her hands trembled as she buttoned her coat. Everything she'd built, the life, the love, the identity she'd shaped for herself and Ethan, suddenly stood on a shifting fault line. That afternoon, as she waited outside Ethan's classroom, she caught sight of Noah standing near the gate, holding a small paper bag with a toy car inside. For a moment, he looked less like a CEO and more like a man holding his breath before meeting someone he'd been searching for all his life. Ethan ran out, laughing, arms outstretched toward her. "Mommy," he shouted, jumping into her arms. She kissed his forehead and turned toward Noah, whose smile trembled slightly as their eyes met. "Ethan," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "There's someone special I want you to meet." The boy turned, curious. Noah bent down, holding out the toy car. "Hi, buddy. I'm Noah." Ethan grinned and reached for the toy. "Do you like cars too?" Noah's throat tightened. "I do. Especially red ones." As the child laughed, Maya stood watching the two of them. One man who'd lost a family. One child who'd unknowingly brought 2 broken hearts back to life. She didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was standing alone in the rain. And somewhere deep inside, as she watched her son's new world begin to open, she realized that sometimes family isn't chosen or inherited. It's found in the wreckage, rebuilt from the ashes, and given a second chance to grow. The rain had stopped, but the city still shimmered under a thin mist that caught the evening light. Maya stood in the park, watching Ethan run in circles around the bench where Noah sat waiting. The boy's laughter echoed through the damp air, pure and unfiltered, while Noah watched him with a look that was part joy, part disbelief. He'd seen 1,000 deals, signed contracts worth billions, but nothing had ever felt as fragile as this. Watching a child who didn't yet know that the world had just changed around him. Maya sat beside him, folding her arms against the cold. "He thinks you're cool," she said quietly. Noah smiled. "He's generous. Most people don't think that anymore." "You mean the board doesn't?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "The board doesn't think about anything that doesn't add profit. Kids are smarter than that." They fell into silence for a moment. Ethan ran up to them and proudly held up a paper airplane made from a leaf flyer he'd found. "Look, Mr. Noah, it can fly." Noah took it, examined it with exaggerated seriousness, and tossed it gently. The paper glided in the air before landing near a puddle. Ethan gasped like it was magic. "You did it." Maya smiled, but her heart tugged. It had been years since anyone shared that kind of laughter with Ethan. "He hasn't had many men to play with," she said quietly. Noah nodded, still watching the boy. "He should have. And I should have been there." The words hit her softly but deep. She wanted to be angry, wanted to protect the world she'd built around Ethan, but she couldn't ignore the truth. Noah wasn't stealing. He was reclaiming what fate had misplaced. Ethan ran off again, chasing a stray balloon. Maya turned to Noah. "So what happens now? You said you didn't want to take him, but you're his blood. Legally, that changes everything." Noah shook his head. "I've already spoken to my lawyers. I won't contest anything. You're his mother. That doesn't change." "Then what are you asking for?" He paused, looking down at his hands. "A chance to know him, to show him where he came from, to make sure he never feels like he was a mistake fate forgot to fix." Maya stared at him, her throat tight. "You really think he can handle knowing all that?" "Maybe not yet," Noah admitted. "But when he's old enough, he'll ask questions. And I don't want the answers to come from papers or rumors. I want them to come from both of us." She sighed, looking out at Ethan. "He's going to love you. I can already tell." Noah's voice softened. "I already love him." The honesty in his tone broke something inside her, something she'd buried years ago beneath exhaustion and survival. She hadn't expected kindness from this man, let alone warmth. As they watched Ethan chase the balloon, Noah leaned closer. "You know," he said quietly, "my sister would have liked you." Maya smiled faintly. I think I would have liked her too. The sun slipped lower, casting gold through the gray clouds. Ethan's laughter carried through the air like a promise neither of them could ignore. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Maya sat on the edge of her bed holding the old adoption file in her lap. The dates, signatures, and stamps that had once represented security now looked like threads in a much larger story. Her phone buzzed. A message from Noah. "Thank you for letting me meet him. He's everything she would have wanted him to be." She typed back slowly. "You gave him back the family I couldn't give." He replied almost instantly. "No, Maya. You gave him the family I lost." Her eyes filled before she could blink them away. She set the phone down and looked toward Ethan's small sleeping form, his hair messy, his toy car still clutched in his hand. The next morning, Noah knocked on their door with a breakfast bag in one hand and a small box in the other. "For you," he said, handing the box to Ethan. Ethan opened it and gasped. A tiny silver airplane pendant lay inside. "It's so shiny. It belonged to your mom's sister," Noah said softly, glancing at Maya. "She said it would always find its way home." Maya met his eyes, her voice a whisper. "You kept it all this time." "I was waiting to give it to him," he said. "I just didn't know who he was." Ethan grinned, holding it up to the light. "Does that mean I can fly too?" Maya smiled, tears threatening again. "It means you already have." As the boy ran off to show his grandmother, Noah turned to her. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." She nodded slowly, the weight in her chest lifting at last. "Maybe I never was." And as he stood there in her doorway, sunlight spilling in behind him, the world felt different, smaller, kinder, healed in places she hadn't known were still broken. If this story made you smile, share it with someone who needs a reminder that accidents can turn into beautiful beginnings.